So it's 2026, we're recording this, and we're still pushing for more manufacturing in Canada and the US, and we're still looking for more people to do that. And on the show today, I've got my good friend and author, Brian Herriot. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Trevor. It's great to be here.
So you're the author of Time Freedom. I was an advanced reader for you, and you've actually kind of helped me figure out a little bit like how do I kind of manage my time a little bit with balancing the work that I have. But today we're going to be talking to the manufacturing leaders and the manufacturing people working in that space. How do we think different, Brian? Because traditionally, when we got out of school, I knew that it was going to be like if you worked in manufacturing, it was shift work, and it was usually like 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7 a.m. Are you in shift one, two, or three? Is it nights, afternoons, or days? But now we got a lot of people that aren't thinking about working in manufacturing, and there's nobody really dreaming about shift work.
Or if they are, they're still trying to make ends meet and doing some other gig work on the side.
A lot of families are trying to figure out, with the daycare and then the
Hmm.
shift work and wanting to have a good life and your book really talked about like how do you have more time now and that you can live more that lifestyle that you want now and you're helping entrepreneurs and others with that time freedom and you founded three businesses and learned that true success means building a life that works for you and I think some of the Gen Xers like us may have said, okay, well, you know what? That's just the way it is, and I'll adjust my life to the work. But the Gen Z, the new people coming into the workforce, which we really need, are more like, well, how's that job going to work for me for what I want? So the scripts are kind of flipped.
Yeah, and I noticed that when I would have early readers who were of the younger generations and people I work with, I would have to kind of reinforce and reinforce there is this different type of lifestyle that you could have, not the traditional work forever and then retire. And when the younger readers would read this, they'd say, "Oh yeah, that's okay. I get it." Like they could move right past that very quickly and say, "Let's get to the meat of the topic here. You don't have to convince me anymore."
Yeah. So the meat of the topic is how are we going to work together with the new generation of workforce and the fact in North America, we want to make more in North America. And we want young people to be thinking, oh, that's cool. What about a career in logistics or transportation or manufacturing? And none of these jobs, though, Brian, they're not as big on AI and they're not as big as working from home. And I think you and I have discussed some more creative options. But you've got some manufacturing background there in Wisconsin and Arkansas, and you were an industrial systems major. So I'm a manufacturing guy, but remind me, what is that role and what were you doing in it?
Yeah. Well, I was always good at math and science coming out of high school, and they said you should go into engineering. And so I thought, okay, I'll go into engineering. And I had to pick an engineering that was appropriate. And I think at the time it was called industrial engineering. Now it's industrial and systems engineering. This was at the University of Wisconsin. And the focus was mostly around process engineering, but manufacturing was one of the key processes that we looked at in all the manufacturing processes. And so I had a class on ISO 9001 and like all these things that you'd never guess that I had background in. And I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin called Ripon, and the major employer there was Speed Queen washers and dryers. And I worked 2 summers there as an intern, as a manufacturing engineering intern, and I got to look at the dryer line and figure
Mm.
out how to make improvements on it. As I was reading early versions of your book, I thought, oh, look, yep, that's exactly what these line managers are trying to do, make improvements. I didn't really have enough time over the summer to truly make improvements. Plus, I had all of the challenges of being a 21-year-old kid trying to tell my friends' parents who were on the line how to do it better. So it didn't work really well. And I ultimately didn't go into manufacturing engineering, but I definitely have that experience. We got to fly in the company plane to Searcy, Arkansas, and also I wrote it down, Fayetteville, Tennessee. These were where the manufacturing plants were, and I got to see it. So it was a pretty fun experience.
It seems like many of us have some tie to manufacturing because everything that we touch is built, and there's a lot of jobs that are tied to that. And And when we do need something, we've seen that during the pandemic, the problem that it causes if you can't build it in your own country and you rely on it. I just think that there's a way, right? There's a way where we can do this, and those jobs can be satisfying because, some of my friends are just kind of like, they had a countdown on their phone on how many days till they didn't have to work at the plant anymore. And
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
like, that's not what we want, right? Like, it was like, I work here for 30 years and then I end here. Right. So what you're bringing, and even you helped me thinking through, and you get this time freedom calculator where, it's just a tool that I'd never seen before. I don't know why I'm no investor, yeah, I got lots of people that will ask me to, invest my money with them.
Mhm.
But then it's like, okay, but then how does this work as far as like how much money do I need? And, where do I pull that from and how will the interest earn here? So you've packaged it in a really simple way that you can understand and have more time freedom. Like you go to Wisconsin, and I went to your lake 17 and I water skied on your lake and spent a night there on the way to the editing retreat in Wisconsin. You and I met through AJ Harper and her team,
Mhm.
and both authors. We're both have the same page two publishing company that we're working with, but you're ahead of me just as far as your progress when your book comes out. And the reason that I thought it was interesting for our listeners today, what's in it for you, the listener, is like, okay, so what's the alternative from just counting down the days to retire and then all of a sudden you don't do work anymore? And so, for example, for myself, I was like, okay, I could continue leading manufacturing plants, but then I saw this like unique opportunity of like helping and coaching, leaders at smaller plants or different plants, and kind of got my business going. And now you've helped me kind of look at some different revenue streams. But if I'm working in a manufacturing plant or I'm an employer, what are
Let
you
me hit
seeing
the
out there?
Yeah, maybe let me hit the employer side first, give you some context for how I think about this to see if this is helpful. But what I learned from your book, early reading it, is the focus on the human, right? The human aspect of anything we do. And I think manufacturing, again, I'm not an expert, but is perhaps later to the game in thinking about their teams as a collection of humans that have varied interests and aren't just, there to place the bolt on.
The frame.
And I had a really great experience at a company called Point B. It was a management consulting company, so it was not manufacturing. But the owners of that company had such respect for the people on the teams, so much respect. Like when we would have a company retreat, they'd place the newest employees in the largest rooms at the retreat, and they would take the smallest rooms. They had personal meetings with everyone that they knew. And then the big thing, which was so cool, was when the company got to a certain size, they knew that the three founders themselves had too much money built up in the company and they needed to diversify, but they didn't want to sell out to private equity or a large consulting firm. They undertook this large process of research to figure out what to do with it, and they ended up selling it to the employees. So, like, I feel
Mm,
like that's the ultimate view of how you treat members of your team as the wonderful things that they are to help you be successful. As part of that process, everyone in the company had to read this book called A Stake in the Outcome. And the name of the author was Jack Stack, and it was a manufacturing book, so that's where I'm
mm,
kind of coming full circle here.
nice.
But he went through this effort at the company that he had to sell it back to the employees, and we learned all about how he did it. And one of the things that he talked about is just the utmost respect for the team to the point of opening the books and letting everybody see why when they use too much toilet paper, it cuts into company profits and how this impacts this and this impacts that. And I believe that in this day and age, that continued focus on your team and supporting them in the way that they need to be supported is something that will separate the good companies from the great companies.
Hmm.
And I think one of those aspects is the fact that the employees these days are working hard, doing their shift work, and then going and working on something else. Maybe they're driving for Uber or Lyft or
Hmm.
working for DoorDash or delivering pizzas at Domino's. And I think as managers, you need to be aware of that these folks are doing these multiple things. And if you're an advanced leader, you're going to help them develop skills that will not just help them in your business, but actually also perhaps in other parts of their lives, including these gig jobs that they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the options, right? Is just having some ownership, right? And they say you got to care more about the company. Well, if you're part owner, well, that definitely changes that perspective.
And I don't know how prevalent that is. In my personal experience at that management consulting company, we already kind of felt like owners because they just treated us with such respect. But then when they actually turned it over to us, that was just the ultimate wow.
Mm.
And because that had all happened at such an influential point in my professional life, I've kind of carried those concepts forward into the book and the concepts there around the fact that every little side gig that you have is not just a side hustle. Like it can be a real business. They usually start that way, and then you can convert that and align that with how you want to live in this more flexible manner.
Well, so another way that I was thinking with your book made
Hmm.
me think of is so yeah, I mean, we're going out and then we're kind of getting these other maybe side jobs, get a more hustle in there. But it'd be interesting if there was just other ways to generate different income through the current companies we have, whether that's like
Oh,
project-based work or the one that we were talking about this morning was, even with the shift work, right? Like that seems to be a big blockade, but like, does it have to be 8 hour shifts? What could there be 4 hour shifts? Could there be 4 6 hour shifts? Right? Like, and 12 hours is a common topic now, right? Where 12 hours, 3 days on, four
hmm.
days off, different combinations. But when I think about time freedom and I think about some of the concepts in there, it's like, hey, I'm 50. I don't want to do 60 hours a week anymore in a factory, right? But I still enjoy the team and I still have a lot of skills. So like it's kind of like this all or nothing. You either got to like cut your ties entirely or you just got to
Right.
keep working till you're 65 on the line. Well, what about if we had ways that we could tap in for 4 hours in the heavy time periods? Or like, hey, there's a product launch. We always need more manpower on a product launch. Here's our forecast the next 3 years. Brian, would you like to be on our launch teams? Right. So we can come in, we can pay you on contract. You'll work this much. Like, do you see that direction going, Brian?
I think that could be a great idea. So when I think about time freedom, I often think, obviously you still have to work because you're not just independently wealthy.
Yeah.
And so if you can structure your work, there are ways to structure your work potentially even as an employee, which is where we're kind of going. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. And if that's the case, you're usually doing part-time. So if you need the same amount of work done, could you do two people, do it like a job share and do two people
Mm-hmm.
20 hours a week instead? Part-time is part of the year. And that's where the project idea comes in, which is great. You need to convert a new line to a new something or other, and it's going to take effort associated with that. Not the day to day, but the initial setup. That's a project. There's an employment there. And when that job is done, more and more people these days are like, good, I'm glad it's done. I would like to have some time off after it. Maybe there's an assumption that you're like, well, I can't do that because then I can't think of, the next job for them. So, maybe I don't want to go there. But that's actually a good thing for both parties, potentially, if each are interested in having that break. That's
Mm-hmm.
really how I do my own job right now. I enjoy the fact that that project will end. And then either I can try, it's important for me to find the next one right away, or it's not. Yeah.
So yeah, you have some of that flexibility in your own role. So if we started thinking like that, like, hey, it's okay if I retire early because what a lot of times I see manufacturing plants do is that we just hire temp employees, right? So it's a temp
Hmm.
agency,
Hmm.
bring me 10 warm bodies that can lift up to 20 pounds. And we run into safety issues. We spend a lot of money on training. We have a lot of turnover. We don't have that commitment. But it's like, what if we could engage with that workforce, like make that part of our extended family, right? Like, yeah, you're not full time with full benefits, but this is a place you can come in, add a lot of value, feel good about it, and then get paid a decent wage.
Here's another thing that just crossed my mind, and I have no idea if this would work. If this is like a crazy idea. But what if the company that you own has a relationship with some financial advisor, or you have expertise in house, and you're actually as a company benefit, helping simple projections for your employees so they know where they are, you know how what they need. And it's during those sessions that you're going to learn, oh, this set of 10 people, they're actually doing pretty well financially. They would prefer to scale back on their hours. And then you will just more intimately know the team that you have that you're working with to see how you could plug and play them in these more flexible positions. But you wouldn't know that unless you were able to offer some sort of way to help because they may not know either. You would have to kind of produce that through these sessions where you could project how they're doing.
Well, especially with the app that you created, right?
Yeah.
Be able to plug in the numbers, right? Because that helped me because I was able to say, okay, so if I want, if I think I'm going to live till 90, then you can kind
Yeah.
of like lay that out and like, how much would I need to make each year? Based on these savings, how much interest can I pull off that in these years? And you know what? Maybe I could do some, this work in my late 60s if it was kind of lighter lifting, in these areas. And all of a sudden, so I like the idea of like, you know, retention's a big challenge, right? And
Hmm.
retention and engagement, manufacturing, those are two big words, right? We want to keep people and we want to keep them engaged. So maybe that's the solution, right? And going to 2030 and thinking,
Right.
okay, so now as we move into the future, you don't have to think about your retirement date. You just got to think about like when do you want to kind of transcend a bit, right? Like when do you want
I
to
love
be
that.
seasonal or when do you want to go to 20 hours a week? Or maybe you have grandkids and you're going to do some of the kid watching and you can just work weekends, right? And then,
Let's figure that out together. And I don't think it has to be complicated. You could have, if you have a, I don't know, small manufacturing company, has, hundreds of people or something like that. You
Mhm.
hire, or you have, one or two people in HR learn how to use a tool like mine that's totally free. Just make sure they really know how to use it. And then you could just help the people that, there's no reason, you don't have to make it complicated. And I love it. It's like you're starting to think, everyone knows their retirement date, but you have the second date, which is your at one point. It was like a rethink date or whatever it happens to be. It's like when you're going seasonal or pulling
Yeah.
back. And then maybe later you want to come back full time again. You just have to be able to handle the flexibility. And to do that, you really need to know your employees well.
Yeah, I like the idea of even HR getting trained and kind of just how to do the spreadsheet, man. It's like, imagine the stress you could reduce, right? Like, okay, well, now I can see it. Now I know I'm going to be okay, right? Like, we know we got a contract on here. I know my employment's good for a little while. If I'm smart and if I save X amount of dollars
Mm,
each, I take that out of my paycheck, then I know that's going to give me the time freedom, right? Of when
yeah,
I want it later. And I also like about your book, right? It's not about like starve yourself now for the next 3 years
right.
and don't eat macaroni and cheese and ketchup all the time. It's not about that. It's about just knowing your numbers. And so I think that's where your book and your concepts can bring kind of the manufacturing company and the employees together, right? Because now it's kind of, okay, now we're on the same page. Now, what's going to work for you? What's going to work here? And all of a sudden now you've got a competitive edge over other employers because otherwise, what? It's $2 more over here an hour compared to across the street, and people are leaving over here. But hey, if I got like a longer term plan, we kind of meet together, and now if you've read my book on manufacturing greatness, and we're not being jerks to each other, so maybe this all comes
And
together.
yeah, and you tell the people the 10 pieces of information that they need to bring to the meeting, and you spend 1 hour with an employee and you map out their financial future for them. No guarantees. We
Hmm.
don't know the future, but at least having some information, it goes a long way to alleviate stress and anxiety. One thing I learned from the early people that read my book is that chapter 12 on the time freedom calculator. When you use it and you lay it out, it's relieving, right? Like,
Is
oh, it's not so bad. And people just don't know. I didn't know before I created it. I don't think you knew before you used it. Like, no, so people are just like, I guess I just have to work till 65. I just
yeah,
assume it. And think of like the assumption. That's a major, major assumption in life.
that helped, Diana, my wife and partner in the business here. It helped us align better, and it didn't change like a ton of what we're doing right now, but it brought some peace and the
Hmm.
fact of, okay, we got a plan. We're going to be okay. it's January and my dad just passed away this month. And I was able to spend the last few months with him. And it was just because I knew long term I'd be okay. I can do this. And I kind of had that time freedom to do that. So, working with you helped me just, I would have done it anyway,
Hmm.
but I was able to do it in a more present, not worried state.
Hearing that makes me feel very good. I feel very good to hear that. I'm so glad you were able to do that and feel the way that you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think that, I think your work is important. That's why I wanted to have you on the show, Brian. And I think that there's opportunities for people that can think different, that, hey, maybe there is another plan, right? Or, maybe these are just some alternatives. I think that's just being creative in our own lives and then having those deeper conversations, like I like what you said with HR, and hey, let's run through this scenario here. And then the people that are structuring, because sometimes it's like, I remember interviewing for a job and it was like a lot of remote type work, but it was in Toronto and I was living 2 hours outside of Toronto. And they're like, no, if you take this job, you got to live in Toronto. It's like, really? So you're going to miss out on me because I'm not
Exactly.
going to live in Toronto. And I think that it's just not going to work anymore. Right. It's got to be like, okay,
Right.
what's the value that you bring? What's the outcome of the role that we're looking for? How much time do you have? Because you could hire someone part time for 4 hours a day that would do as much work as someone that does 8 hours a day that doesn't have the same experience.
Totally agree. Yep.
I love it. There's going to be so many opportunities for manufacturing in North America. And so I've got your book pre ordered. And so tell us a little bit more, Brian, about your book launch, where you're doing, how do people get access? You got some bonuses.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book launches in September, which is a long time from now. What I've learned is we're a society of let's show me what you can get me now. And
Yeah.
so to kind of get over that hump, I have actually read the entire book and created a private podcast, which is essentially an early version of the audiobook.
Mm.
And so my bonus offer for listeners here is that if you order just a single book from Amazon or wherever you order books, and you put your order number in my form and you put Trevor as the special code, I'll send you that audiobook for free immediately so you can have access to it and also the download of the different figures and things so that you can follow along while you're listening. And normally the offer is or pre-order 3 books and get the free audiobook. But for you guys, order 1 book, put the code Trevor in and get the free audiobook right away. And
And
then the
for our
book comes in
manufacturing,
September. Then the book comes in
yeah.
September. So it's like a 2 for 1.
Yeah, you get the hard copy. And you're probably driving in your car right now, or maybe you're doing up some paperwork at your desk right now. You're listening to this. So that's the opportunity for the book too. I really encourage you all to buy this book, to listen to it now, because it'll help with family members and friends and ideas, and also just solving the problems of your workforce right now. And I really believe that common language and just kind of thinking a little bit different is going to take us into that next generation. And it's helped me so much. What else? What's your final message for the listeners here going back into work here, Brian? What do you want to leave them with?
The thing that I always think about is a lot of times I think we just, you know, put the 1 foot forward in front of the next foot and just keep going, without, thinking that there might be a different way to do things. And if you're happy, great, just keep doing it. But if for whatever reason you're like, this just isn't working, there is a different way, another option. And I think the first step is to just be exposed to what that might be. And a book is a great low cost way to see different ways of seeing things. And, as we've learned in writing these books together, it's our whole life experiences in 250 pages, an incredible value. I would urge if it's not going great and you need something different, don't just grin and bear it and do it for another 20 years or 10 or
Mhm.
5 even. Life is too short.
Yeah.
There's different, better ways to do things out there.
And I'll just endorse, I mean, just having not only read your book, because there's a lot of books out there, and 1% of all books get read to the end, right? And yours is one that's going to get read because you've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of just making this better for the reader. You had over 200 advanced readers,
It's
to
the
go
truth.
through this just before even it got to your edit, as you're getting your editor. It's good, dude. And thanks for just, writing a good book and helping us in manufacturing look at something different.
Thanks so much, Trevor. It's been a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Thanks, buddy.